We're Ashley and Sabrina,
your co-host for Ruck, Buttercup podcast.
Military life can be challenging,
but also has its advantages.
Come and be part of the unfiltered
and sometimes unhinged conversations with fellow military spouses, Kayla and Laura, as we dive into the occasional rant
and brave of military life.
Share the stories that make us who we are,
and showcase the amazing organizations
and resources out there that make our lives a little bit better.
Whether you're new
or a seasoned military family,
we all need a little extra love.
Make sure to catch us on Wreath Across America Radio at 11 p.m. on Wednesdays.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Ruck, Buttercup. Ashley and I are here with Crystal McLean. She is our wonderful guest. It has been, I think, almost 2 years of our season since we've had a financial expert on, which is, as a military community, is something we all need more knowledge on. So we're so excited to have you, Crystal. Do you want to go ahead and kind of tell us a little bit about what you do with Moneybox Academy and yourself?
Absolutely. Well, hello, everyone. It's an honor to be on here with these two beautiful ladies. My name is Crystal McLean. I am the founder and board chair of Moneybox Academy. We are an intergenerational financial literacy nonprofit. Our whole goal and mission is to ensure that as young as kindergarten, going all the way up to our seniors and elders, extended out to, veterans, active duty, college students, all those things, entrepreneurs, we are really big on making sure that financial intelligence is infused into our community. And my journey started as a single mother and trying to teach my daughter about healthy money habits while trying to figure out myself. And I just went on this whole journey of learning. And while I was learning, I started teaching others. And it just became a big passion to, continue taking it to the next level. So that's a little bit about me.
And it's absolutely necessary. We homeschool, and I know that that's a huge thing, is making sure that my kids understand. So I make them do grocery shopping with me, and plan their own meals occasionally. And I'm like, you guys need to understand that it's not cheap, and you think that moms, you're bougie, because I think their generation is lucky. We didn't eat sushi as children, but they get those things, and it's but do you realize how much that cost?
Right.
Only $20. I'm like, it's only $20.
Only, only in front of that. That's insane.
The amount of times my son has said that, I'm like, oh, it's only $10, Mom. I'm like, yeah, but you asked for $5 yesterday, and then you asked for $20 last week.
That all adds up.
It all adds up. So it's not just $20.
That's right.
$10.
That's right. I know we just finished a high school boot camp, and what the last day of it was a simulation event. And the simulation was pretty much like, hey, this is your profile. And we pretty much asked them throughout the week, what did they want to be, a post-graduation, what profession they wanted to go into. And we took that and analyzed it and gave them a salary based on the average salary on that profession. And so they got their monthly pay, and they may or may not have a child, right? We sporadically did that. And then their credit score, we gave them a credit score. And they had to go in this simulation and pay their rent or buy a house or, pay their car payment or, do Uber or whatever. And we had young people saying, well, can I get a roommate? Or if they had a child and we're like, you got to pay your child care this month. One of them made a statement like, my mom takes care of my child. I'm just like, this is, it's they made up their own narratives to be more comfortable to, the financial, but it also, they started to have an appreciation around what their parents do on a regular. And you had kids going, because some of the parents were there, you had kids going up to their parents saying, I didn't know that that's how much utilities actually cost. I didn't know that. So
I love that. I think that should be done for every single youth.
I agree.
Across the board. I remember taking home ec in school, and I think I took it in middle school, and it was right before home ec just kind of flipped it away. I personally haven't seen it in any schools.
No.
In set, and I'm like, why are we not teaching our youth these capabilities? We're not teaching them how to write a check. I get it. Checks are not used, but they are used still in a lot of locations. The amount of times where we move someplace, especially as a military family, you move to places if you're going to smaller towns and things like that, they're like, we only accept checks. And you're like, oh, now I have to order checks.
Yes.
How do I order checks? Things like that. And so I personally think home ec should come back. I think all of the things that they teach, cooking, how to do
Yes.
laundry, how to budget. I wish we had done like more on budgeting.
Me too.
And
The
Yes.
camp thing sounds so cool because like, well, we had home ec also when I was that age, but like we, instead of learning like financial information, which would have been so much more helpful, they sent us home with those fake babies, and it's like
the fake babies.
the reality of
Yes.
that is not really that reality. There's a few teenage pregnancies, but it's not that often. It's like I would so much rather have learned how to set up a full budget, how to finance like loans.
Thank
Like Ashley
you.
just bought a house. Like loans are so scary, and you don't know.
And I think like on top of that, like if you set us, like I wish I had been taught like how to put money into savings, like how there's different savings accounts, how that would benefit me, buying stocks, whatever the case may be, any of that. I'm almost 40, y'all, and I still am like, what the hell is happening?
No,
like,
for
I
real.
don't know.
And
Because
that's
it
the
wasn't
thing.
taught.
It wasn't taught. And because one of the pillars in Moneybox Academy is advocacy. And I always say I got a big mouth and I'm going to use it, right? And so, we've been advocating. We actually just, did something on a state level. And so we're advocating for financial literacy to be more infused in curriculums. And the biggest thing that I say when I'm advocating is that every other subject, you think about math, you think about science, you think about social studies, they all have concepts built upon concepts, right? You don't start off at multiplication, you start off with addition. You don't start off, with reading, full paragraphs. You start off with reading words. Like it's the same thing, right? Every concept. But why is it that with financial literacy, the state of North Carolina did say that, it is a requirement that you pass one financial literacy class before you graduate. That did happen a few years back. And like, hooray, we got some like momentum around this. However, you throw one course that every single one of us, you just said it, we're all going to have to manage our money at some point in our adult life. Like pretty much every day, really.
When you think about it, though, if you set your citizens up for success, our economy wouldn't be the way it is. We wouldn't
I
have
agree.
families who are struggling to budget their money, buying groceries and things like that. Like, I feel like there would be so much less struggle happening for the majority of American society, not just military families, but I mean, military families have a lot because of the constant moving, things like that. It's a constant change. And that's what I'm in the process of middle of that. And I'm like, we have to do this again. But I genuinely feel like if this was back in play,
yes,
and it was required across the board, the financial freedom, like I feel like families would have the freedoms to do more.
Yeah.
Because they're going to know, like, oh, I at 17 learned how to do X, Y, and Z. So I started putting, 10% of my paycheck into this type of, savings account. And by the time I was 30, I had this much money in there. Like, that's just not talked about.
Yeah, and it's not. And it's honestly, it's frustrating because to your point of, how beneficial it would be for families and communities that learn this early on, and it would be more preventative to poverty and, homelessness and these things that our economy and over our communities are struggling with. You know, I believe that, when it comes to this, ignorance honestly breeds money for big
Yeah, I was just
corporations.
saying they're
I've
trying
been
to keep
in
us at this place because that's what works for the economy.
it literally does. If you think about, I mean, I've worked for several banks over my tenure. I've been an investment banker. So I know all these things around. But my role when I first became a personal banker, my role was to sell products. And a part of selling products, banking accounts, checking accounts, I might get in trouble. But a part of selling products is, we want you to get a bank account. We want you to get a credit card. We want you to get, a loan. We want you to get a car loan through us, right? That makes that corporation a lot of money. But if you are ignorant to interest rates and you're
What
ignorant
all it
to,
means. Exactly.
like
You're just like, oh, this is a good deal. Do, and then just sign.
yeah, yeah. So I believe that our economy and our community suffers when it comes to ignorance because it's better for those that honestly wanted more. You know what I mean? Like, it's sad, but that's the reality we see.
That's why it keeps the people who are rich stay rich, because we all just, they're like, oh, we won't teach them how to invest. Like, that's the biggest thing is I think I see the rich people, the 1%, know how to invest. They're always in on trades. They know, and that's how they're making their money. And they're like, we're not teaching you guys how to do that. All don't need to join in,
No,
because then they
how dare we?
wouldn't
Yeah,
have that like ability to keep themselves at their standings if they taught us. So it is sad. And I think that's the benefit of homeschooling, is that there's things like Moneybox Academy where your kids can take these classes and learn at a younger age, and you can set them up to hopefully succeed a little bit better than ourselves. I mean, I feel like as millennials, all of us as millennials kind of hit that, like, we just may never actually be completely financially free, just because we didn't learn until
yes,
now. We're all learning at this generation at our age, and it's like now we're so far in debt, or we've done so many things that our credit's messed up, that we just may never recover.
Yeah, and I think
yeah,
just that, like, just speaking of the credit, like, just even just teaching youth like how to keep their credit good and how to keep it from not plummeting, and how that will affect you as you go through life.
absolutely.
Because, like, no, they didn't tell you, they don't
Never.
tell you that, every time you apply for an application or a loan, it's a hit and everything like that. So I genuinely think that is something that should be in play, and love that you're advocating for that to be in schools. I didn't even know it was in North Carolina school, so that's fantastic to hear that they have that in. I remember we had to take an economics class when I graduated in North Carolina.
But I feel like a lot of
Which
those
I couldn't
accounting and
do.
economic classes are so based on like businesses and not really the personal model of finance.
It's
Personal life,
and
exactly.
that's my problem. You just summed it up. The I my background in my bachelor's of science was in banking and finance, right? So odd enough that you graduate with a 4-year degree and you still don't really know how to handle your personal finances, because when you look at those courses, you talk about macro and microeconomics, you talk about accounting and all of this. This is frameworks for the economy at
Mm-hmm.
large, but it doesn't fuse down to my personal economy. And what does budgeting look like? It teaches you about how the banking systems work, how does trade work, and all these things. But it doesn't tell you, like, okay, when you get your check in, how to split it up between your needs, your wants, and investment savings. None of that, right? And so it doesn't tell you how is a credit score made up, because it's just a formula. But it doesn't tell you how it's made up, and the best strategies to prevent it from going down and things like that. And so you get older and you're having to make all these different financial decisions: buy a home, buy a car, looking at your kids' future. Do I have any investment set aside for them, and all these things? And the reality is you're behind, right? Because you're at this point, you got kids and you're trying to manage this, and you feel behind. You feel the pressure that if I had just done, or if I had known this. And it's like, well, why is it as a society we don't
Yeah.
know this?
And I think that
Yeah,
I was
and I
gonna say,
think
as a military community, it's because we don't have that kind of financing. I think a lot of people think, oh, military
Yep.
is good money.
And it changes every 3 years. You're like, yes, the military moves you. They pay for movies and stuff like that, but it doesn't cover the cost of paying deposits for utilities out in a different state and country, or different wherever you go. It doesn't pay for, restocking the refrigerator and your cabinetry and your pantry. It doesn't pay for
Any stuff outside of your move, like
having to change your insurance and all those things. Some states, you have to re-register your vehicle, even though I just renewed my registration 3 months ago. It doesn't matter. I have to go in the state because that's the state law. So it all comes down. I mean, I would say, like, on average, a military family probably spends close to $3,000 to $4,000 out of pocket for moves. Yes, you can do it cheaper. Yes, you can get out of a lot of things. There are things in place where you can get that money back for deposits and things like that, but, like, the process is just also so much work to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so
Which is, I think that's why, like, I know we are about to start working with a foundation that's here locally that their whole mission is around active duty families and military communities and things like that. And so they've contracted us to pretty much come and teach their audience for the next few months some of these same topics. And essentially, with to your point, the thought is like, yes, I know that there may be a mandatory deployment, right? And I know that there are some costs that I may not have been prepared for, right? That may or may not be reimbursable, but you think about the concept of reimbursable, I have to pay it up
Mhm.
front, right? And so what if I don't have it right now, you know? And so the thought around that is, again, who is teaching that, hey, this is part of your job requirement that you may have to transition, uproot your entire family from this place to that
I
place.
I have
Like,
been doing it for
where
years.
is the sinking fund? And
Mhm.
a lot of times it's not taught that, okay, we know that this is a possibility. So every pay period, we have a deployment fund, right?
Yep.
Whether or not, you know, for the next few years we touch it or not, but it literally is a certain percentage of the household income goes into this bucket for the just in case moment. And you may look up and it's $10,000 in there, and you do have a deployment and it only costs you $3,000 and you're getting that reimbursed. Think about the benefit that it was $3,000 reimbursed back to you. You had $10,000 sitting in that account ready for a situation like this, and you're essentially, you don't feel
Oh,
the stress. It's stressful
Mhm.
enough to uproot your family, but to think about money on top of that makes it even more stressful.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Like, I mean, especially like, having, like, if you know you have pets, if you know you have things that are going to cost that extra amount, putting that into next PCS move or start preparing for that. Like, that way it's already there and you're not stressing about what you're going to do. I mean, I feel like that's why a lot of our families live on installations. They live on post housing because they can't afford to live off post,
Right.
because of some places require 2 years or 2 months worth of deposit and things like that. But you had said something about how we don't teach, and I have been saying for years that there should be classes embedded into incoming brand new baby soldiers, whether they're married or not, that they should have trainings on family readiness, what that means, and that's something completely different, on the financial, like how to read their LES, how to do savings, what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing, even if you're living in the barracks. Like, even if
Yeah.
you were living in the barracks and you have all this fun, because most of these babies are coming in and they're first time away from mom and dad. They're
Yeah.
going to get credit cards to go buy, brand new TV, things like that. They're buying new cars that
oh, the
they may
cars
not be
are the
able to
biggest thing. Is
afford.
that and the dealerships know that. They're like, oh, there's going to be a whole branch of new babies coming into the base, and I mean, even my husband went down and bought a
Yeah.
Well, and they
car.
approve it because they know they can, and they prove these things because they know, like, what's just different about, our civilian counterparts in the military members is financial institutions will likely approve something a lot better for a
Mhm.
military person because they can get their money. They'll get their money no way.
They'll get their
Like,
money. Yeah.
they'll get their money because all they have to do is contact that workplace and they'll get that money. I have seen it so many times. I've seen it so many times where, I mean, we had a family one year who was just like moved out of a house, didn't tell them that they were moving out of the rental, just left, and they had 3 months worth of no paid rent that they still had. They were like, no, you owe us this money. And so they had to come through and they had to figure it out and all that kind of stuff. And so it happens. And I've seen it all the time with cars, like
Always.
go and buy a car, not realizing the payment and things like that. What are they going to do with that car, knowing that they go buy a car and they're going on a deployment in 3 months. And so it's going to sit there.
It's gonna sit.
And so, like, we were talking about ours, like, my husband's going overseas. He can't bring his POV with him. Like, he can't bring his truck. He can't bring his motorcycle. And I'm like, but I have to sit here and pay on all of these things.
Yeah.
And it's gonna sit there for a year. And I mean, like, it's fine. It's what it is what it is. Like, I'd rather pay it and have it paid off. But I'm just like, that's a good chunk
Yeah.
of change that we, for something that's not being used.
And you think about, like, to your point earlier about it should be a
Mhm.
requirement that all new incoming kind of gets this. I believe that having, and I've seen that they have like personal financial coaches or instructors
Yeah,
a part of the military. I do
but I
know
think
that
it's
that
really
does
expensive.
exist. Right.
Yeah.
I do know it exists, but I agree with you that, you think about like insurance covers mental health, right? Because it covers, but what's covering financial health, right? And you think about the correlation between your financial health to your mental health. People that are depressed, a lot of times, if you look at it, it's correlated to debt and overwhelm and like I can't get over the hump type.
Living
People that
paycheck to
are
paycheck, like
yeah, people
worrying
that are
about if they're gonna put food
anxious.
on the table, things like that.
Yeah, you think of mental health issues, you think about anxiety and all these different things. A lot of times it is tied to some financial issues that are not addressed or not. And so we have a lot of coverage and things and thoughts around mental health now, which that's great. I'm glad we've grown as a community, as a culture, as an economy around mental health. However, one concept that is being still missed is financial health and how it affects the
It
overall
totally does
being
too,
in
because
the
like we
family.
moved twice in this last 6 months, and the moving part isn't that what stresses me out. Packing, loading the truck, fine, whatever. But it was like, are we going to get reimbursed for these moves? Can we afford? Like, what are we going to do? I know when we moved to Germany, we had to get a personal loan because we were like, all these expenses. While yes, most of them get reimbursed eventually, are straight out of pocket, and that's another thing with military families. Like the average that Ashley's talking about, $3,000. If you get sent overseas, so much more of that is reimbursed, and
It's
it's
so much
that's
more.
thousands and thousands of dollars, and I don't think families are aware of that, and you just come down on orders. Like, you may not have savings, so then you are getting things like a personal loan because you're like, oh, I have to pay for the tickets in advance, I have to pay for all these things that are thousands of dollars, and there's nobody teaching us. There's nobody like, okay, well, this would have been a better
Exactly.
choice than getting a credit card, or this would have been a better choice than getting that personal loan because that personal loan costs more.
Or what to look for, like if you are gonna get a credit card, like what to look for, like what would be most beneficial
Yeah,
for you or your family. Like all of those things come into play for
I
sure.
agree. I agree. And that's the thing. You end up making decisions based on what you think or based out of like
Mm-hmm.
reaction, right? We gotta move, we gotta
Whatever's
do this,
quickest.
and we
Yeah.
just gotta make it happen, and there is not a lot of in some cases not a possibility of too much of proactiveness
Mhm.
outside of those sinking funds and
Yeah.
preparing and all of that. But again, who's saying that, right? Who's and like you said, weighing options on, am I using a credit card if my savings did not
Mm-hmm.
cover this, or am I using another form of line of credit? Am I using a personal loan, which is statistically, depending on what type, the interest rate
Mm-hmm.
can be really high. And so, when you do get the reimbursement, you end up by that point, the interest has eaten up
Yeah,
so much of,
because we didn't know
so it's
that. I
like
mean,
there's so many
we
ways to
we were
navigate it.
aware of that,
Yeah,
but like at the same time, you just don't think about that. And we're like, we need this loan, and that was what it was. And we're like, that's okay. We'll get reimbursed, and it'll all be paid back. And this is what 3 years later, and we still have that loan. And it's like, while we did put as much of the reimbursement as we could back into that loan, it just never covered it. Mm-mm.
it didn't cover. Yeah, and
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 then it
that's
just kind of keeps adding on and adding on
yeah,
and adding on each
that's
move,
it.
each time. Like,
Because the interest a lot of times does not get talked about enough.
mhm.
And like I've had clients that when they would come into the bank and they will be like, I just got this car loan, I'm trying to set it up, and I will look at the rate and I would ask them, because I'm just that person, I'm like, do you know what you just signed up for? Like, do you really know? And they'll be like, well, my monthly payment, I can afford the monthly payment. I'm like, but can you afford the
Mm-hmm.
car?
Yeah.
Like, you can afford the monthly payment, but if you look at the interest
You'll
rate,
never
you're gonna
own
pay for
it.
this car
Yeah.
3 times. Can you really afford this car? And so, that's why I talk about like really being able to look at the language and knowing what is the norms. Like, if it's beyond this, if the interest rate is beyond this is outside of the norm.
Mhm.
And yes, it could be some factors that cause, because they'll say, well, yeah, my credit is not the best. Yeah, but should you really be paying 20 something percent on a collateral based loan, like, and
Yeah.
so because I know these things, again, companies and corporations become billionaires off of ignorance. So these car dealerships are like, yeah, you said you want $350 car payment, we got it figured out, but on the other side they didn't say that your car payment was 22%. And so you think about it like that, being able to look at the fine language and actually make a decision before running in the reactionary
Mm-hmm.
level.
So the best helpful thing that we've learned over the years is budgeting. There's a lot of resources I
Mhm.
know available through the military, through one source and stuff like that. But again, it's not required. So then those most likely young soldiers can be like, I don't need to go take that class on my own. They're not going to. But what would be like maybe your top tips on how to like really set up a budget, especially for like and the younger military families?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the first thing I would say is, and if you're struggling with this, I would sit down with, like, even some bankers allow you to sit down and have a budgeting session, because again, when you're new to it, you're gonna do what you think you should do, right? Versus having a professional come in and really sit down and look at everything and help you analyze it. So that's step number one, is definitely, if you can at all possible, seek out profession. But if you are like, girl, I'm about to DIY this, I got you. So to DIY, it is literally taking a moment to sit down and look at everything, all of your income first. And I want you to look at your net income. The net income is really the money that hits the account. That's the money that when you look at your direct deposit, that's the money that settles in the account.
Mhm.
And you can look at your check stub and look at net pay as well, because this is after all the deductions, all the things for insurance, taxes, and all these things. So now you're looking at your net pay and look at all the sources of income in the household. If there's any type of retirement benefits from a previous job, if there's a spouse income or whatever, look at all of this comprehensively. That's step one. Now that you've gotten the income figured out, the next step is to literally map out all the expenses, and not just what you think like rent slash mortgage or car payment, but literally some of the stuff that you are proactively thinking about. Some of those variable costs that, groceries, you want to think about your savings plan, you want to think about maybe accelerating your debt. My husband and I were able to pay off of both of our cars. I had just got a new car, and his car still had a balance on it. But I was like, no, I want this paid off or
Mhm.
whatever. My loan was a 72-month loan. We paid both those cars off in 18 months, because what we did was we did a accelerated debt plan. And so within our budget, we recognize, I love a zero based budget. So if you're not familiar with it, look it up, but it's called a zero based budget. It doesn't mean your checking account ends with $0.
Is
It just
accounted
means
for.
every dollar, Dave Ramsey says it a lot, every dollar has a job, right? And so you're like, okay, I've allotted, $400 for groceries. I've allotted, $250 for savings or for our deployment fund or whatever the case is. And now you've mapped all these things out. I've put, $100 aside for entertainment and eating out. Like, let's be honest, because most people, when they get a budget, they're like, oh no, I'm not gonna. I'm like, that's a
There's
lie. We
always
all
that
know you're
night.
gonna we're gonna go out to eat
Yeah.
or whatever. Yes. And what you don't want to do is
Hmm.
lie to yourself in this process. You want to be as like true to yourself as possible. If you know you eat out regularly, or you always got to have that cup of coffee, and that nothing is going to change because you got this piece of paper in front of you. Just keep that in
Mhm.
mind. So now map out everything. I traditionally spend this much. I'm going to try to scale back $25 on this. It's the same. I always say health and wealth is synonymous. You think about working out and getting fit or whatever. You're not going to, if you go cold turkey, it's not going to be sustainable. You stop eating all sweets, you stop eating all meat,
Hmm.
guess what? It's not sustainable. But if you can really say this is a lifestyle change, so again with the money, a lifestyle change, I may be able to get the grocery under $350 if possible. I may be able to get my dining out budget under, 125 for the month for the whole family. My husband and I, we still do allowance to this day. We're grown, yes, but we look at the budget and we say, okay, based off this amount of money that we have, you're going to get this amount, I'm going to get this amount, same amount, right? But that is your freedom money to do what you need to do without impacting the main operating account, because you're going and swiping a card and it's not accounted for, right? So if it's $150 this month, you better figure it out. And after your money is
Hmm.
gone, your money is gone. Like, wait for next month. That really does help when it comes to budgeting, and it's on your level. Comparison is robbery. So if you're looking at somebody else's budget and you're like, they're always going on trips and all of that, I will always say this to every person I talk to. Remember the season you're in. Don't look
Mhm.
next to you. Don't look at your neighbors and what they're doing. They bought an RV, they bought whatever. Don't think about that. Stay true to who you are in the season you're in, so that you can actually look back and be like, wow. we've now created a strong nest egg of wealth, and we can actually do some of
Yeah.
the things we
And the
desire to do.
budgeting, so what we do with our budget is we move like we just did like a month ago, and we watched just for the first month we bought an Etsy form. Etsy has a bunch of digital ones that are all formatted and everything. You literally just put in your expenses, you put in your, and it calculates exactly where things are. And for the first month after our move, we just spend like we normally would have at our last location, just see where the money's going, and then that way we're able to go in on the next month and be like, okay, well, we spent about 400 on groceries, then
Good.
we could probably keep it around that much. And then you kind of just can level out, because I know it is so overwhelming to sit down and be like, I don't know what my expenses are. I can't even guess what I'm going to spend on coffee. I can't. So for a month, sometimes we end up being like, oh no, we've spent all of our money at the end of the month. And then you realize, okay, well, maybe we shouldn't have bought 12 coffees, right? Like, then you can really look at
Right.
where the money's actually
Right.
going.
And if somebody is listening that wants to do pretty much what you just said, which was such a good tip, somebody wants to do what you just did, but they're like, I'm listening to this now and I want to start this like ASAP. What you could do is pull your last 3 bank statements and your last 3 credit card statements, whatever statements, pull them out. And literally, while you're doing your budget, just kind of highlight, okay, this was how much we paid for the lights. Now take that number for utilities and then average it. So, take that number, average it out, and like, okay, this is on average how much we spend for utilities. This is how many times we went grocery shopping, and this is how much we spent on average for the last 3 months on groceries.
Mm-hmm.
Can we reduce it? Maybe. Can we get it down to this number to make sure the math is mathing? Maybe. But if you guys are wanting to do something that's similar to what was just said, it literally is a matter of just looking
Yeah.
at what you
And it
spent
takes time. It
previously.
takes a lot of work. And I mean, even just keeping our budget up to date now, like we're on a trip right now. We're in an
Yes,
entirely different state, but so our spending does fluctuate. But we had to sit down at the beginning of the month when we set up our budget. I was like, okay, we're gonna be gone for this week. That means our gas needs to go up a couple $100 because we know we're driving. We need to add on some restaurants because everybody's
yep,
gonna want to go out to eat. They don't want to cook at their house. Like, so that we had to change your
that's
budget
right.
because you have to think about those things. Like, you can't just like make a budget and just be like, that'll work for the rest of the year. Like, that's not how.
Well,
Right,
and the thing is, it's like you
exactly.
have to revisit too,
Mhm.
like every location, like how you said, like every location you change, like, our budget's going to look way different on this move
Mhm.
because we're going to be 2 households for the
Yes,
whole year. So I'm like, budgeting groceries. I'm going to have to budget like, okay, the groceries for me and the kids, and then the groceries for my husband. And then, I mean, he's not going to be driving, but I'm going to have to budget in public transportation costs, and then
yep,
gas for me. And then thankfully, we're, it's not a batching our decision geobatching, so like we won't have to cover the cost of 2 different homes. There still is going to be 2 separate BAHs, but that's not the case for everybody. So like, that's a whole different story when you
right.
have that situation. So the budgeting
Yeah.
is something you have to
And there are
revisit
tools, like I mentioned the
so
Etsy charts,
often.
and we use, it's like an Excel sheet that they've created. It's pretty, which makes me want to fill it out more. But we can also stick it in our shared Google Drive so that if he is doing, yeah, he can pop in there and be like,
It
oh,
can be
I'm going to just
used.
add in these few things that we did this week. And so we both have access to it, which is super helpful. It's not just sitting on our computer somewhere where like we would have to log in.
Yeah, that's exactly what we do. We literally, my
Well,
husband and
okay,
I
so you
both
just
use Google
you just said something
spreadsheets.
super important that you
Mm-hmm.
both do. And I think that's also something really, really important to state is that both parties who are responsible for financial charges, whether you're both swiping cards or you're both bringing in money, have to
Mm-hmm.
be on the same page. Creating a budget and saying this is what we're going to do and your partner is not doing
Yes,
it, it's not going to work.
it's
I,
not.
I can tell you from personal experience, it
Me
will
too.
not work if both parties are in the agreement of, we both agree like 300 is our fund money, whether that is you guys set up separate bank accounts and transfer it, whether however the case may be. But if you're not on the same page, or like we have a rule in our house that if you're going to go purchase something, anything over
Yep.
$150,
Yeah.
we have to be,
Have
hey,
to
are you okay
communicate.
with this?
Yeah.
Especially like more so him, because I handle all the financial stuff. So like, he could go look at the bank account and there's all this
Where
money
it's
in the account,
going.
but
Yeah.
he doesn't realize
It's
where it's
about to
going,
what's about
what
to
bills have to come
clear.
out,
Yep.
what needs to do, all that kind of stuff. And so having those conversations,
Yes.
communication, we talk about that so much here on the podcast, like having those constant conversations and communications about the wants and the needs of the family that has to be done before you even do your budget.
Yeah.
That's how I feel. Like, you have to have those conversations of, okay, hey,
Mhm.
these are all of our expenses.
Yeah.
This is what there's no wiggle room in this
And my
whatsoever.
husband and I, what we started doing, which was helpful for us, is we don't have these conversations in the house, right? We typically say that because our house is our place of peace and it's our safe haven, we don't want to have these type of conversations in the house. So what we do is once a quarter, we do a business meeting, and we typically do it at Barnes and Noble. Been doing it for years, and
I love
that's the time. Yes, that's the time when we talk about the businesses, we talk about the finances. We pretty much look at the finances together, create a budget for the next 3 months, right? Like, because we've kind of already proactively looked at what's going to be happening, what's on the schedule, and things like that. We talk about any, at that point, if there's any big purchases that one wants to make or invest in or whatever, we discuss that, and how do we feel about it. And so it takes us out of the mindset or out of the proximity of the house where it's just husband and wife. This is our intimate place. This is our love. This is where our daughter is. This is the family time. To, like, now we have a different hat on. Right now, this is the business side. This is covering this. This is covering that. And so it took some time because he felt the way he felt. I felt the way I felt. And like you said, I predominantly managed manage the finances. So then there was this thought of like, well, I'm making
Mm.
money and I can't even,
And
use
that's
the
why
money.
a lot of families, military
Yes.
families specifically, especially if you have a wife who is a stay-at-home mom, well, it's my money. Every family is different. Every opinion's different, but you have to kind of get over that mindset of,
Yeah.
I'm the one that's working, it's my money, because there's so many reasons why your spouse may not be working. I mean, even I'll hear it even with spouses who do work, but they're not making as much money, or they're not bringing in
Right.
that BAH, because that's a separate component
Right.
to the service members' pay. So yeah, you'll hear that. So it will take a while, and it will take, like, hey, well, I understand that. Or even like, he may think this is important, like to budget money for a brand new TV, and you're gonna be like, we don't need a brand new TV. We need to budget that money because our kids going to be they're outgrowing their clothes right now, and
Right.
clothes are
Well,
expensive
I think the
nowadays.
hardest
Like,
Yes,
time
they
of year
are.
for that is when tax
and
season comes around. Because as lower enlisted, you do get a good tax back, right? We're all expecting your tax return, but then it's like, oh, should I put that towards credit cards that we owe? Or hey, we haven't been able to spend a lot of money on ourselves because we do live paycheck to paycheck. Let's go buy all these things.
Yep.
Yeah.
let's go buy stuff.
Yeah.
That's conversation definitely have. We have kind of a rule with ours is, if we have something that's a big ticket item, we typically will save it for the tax return, and we kind of alternate each year. So like, one year we'll put that towards something that my husband wants, and the following year, so like this past year, I knew I wanted to go on a trip. I have not gone on a trip since I've had my kids. I have not done anything like that. So we knew that a portion of that coming back would go towards my trip, and towards a trip where, like, I wasn't cutting on expenses. Like, I was, staying at the really nice hotel. I was staying at, I didn't cut it because, looking like back over the last 10 years of at least having the kids, knowing that, hey, you've got to go to all of these things. And I have been at home with the kids, and, this is what we want to do. Like, this is what I would like to do. And
Yeah.
so, like, for this year, probably is going to go towards plane tickets to go see my husband in Poland. So I think, like, but having those conversations, but I do feel a
Yeah.
lot of people will go at tax season and will use it to go buy a new TV, or use it for something that they may not necessarily need, but like, they're like, let's treat ourselves. And I think that's totally
Yeah.
fine to treat yourself, but
And
awesome.
I think that, to your point, I think there's a level of balance that needs
Yep.
to happen. I've never been the financial coach to say, like, don't do anything with your money. And, because when I travel, to your point, like, I'm not going to be
Yeah.
like super, no. I
No.
want valet. I want because I work so hard.
Life's too short to not have the fun things in life.
Come
If
on,
you
like,
want that pair of designer shoes,
and see, for me, and this
balance
is
it out.
why I always talk to my clients about identifying your values. And a lot of times we don't do value-based budgeting. And so before, if anybody's listening right now, like before you really start to go into that budget activity we talked about, like where you're pulling your statements or you're looking at your last month of spending and you're building out your budget, what I would ask you to do before you do that is to list out your values. List out at least 5 things that you value immensely. Like you really do value these things. You may say my health, you may say family. For me, one of those things is travel and experiences. I value experiences.
Yeah, same.
So for me, my values is not materialism. Like I don't like I have the same phone for I don't know how many years at this point. Once the car was gotten, like I was driving the same car until my husband was like, "You can't drive that car anymore. Like it's acting up." And so like for me, new things, new clothes, new shoes is not a value for me because that I've identified my values is experiences. I like to try new things. I like new cultures. I like to eat different like I do. But if you value, clothes and shoes and things like that, that's honest. Be honest with that and make sure your money aligns with what you value. But for me, it would almost be an oxymoron for me to spend money on a new TV and new shoes and things like that because it doesn't even align with my values. And so I always tell people just to be very honest with like what do you value?
Yeah.
Like not what do you want,
Well,
but
and I
like
think we
what
were
do you
talking
really
about
That's a
earlier was
value?
great
the
point.
comparison of like,
That's
oh,
a
well, my
great
neighbor is able to go on all these trips, but that's what they're putting their value to. Yeah, and you
That's
see people with
probably because they value
hundreds
that.
of tattoos.
Yeah,
I can't afford that because I know value wise, I don't want to spend my money on that as much as I would prefer to go on this trip that we're saving for.
and I
Exactly.
think you'll see that. Like I have a friend that they go on these grand trips, multiple trips a year.
Yeah.
And at one point I was just like, how are you doing this? And it was that's what they value. So they didn't go out to eat. They didn't, they did mostly secondhand clothing and things like that. And they put a lot of that money that could have gone towards that. They had 4 kids, towards going on those trips. And that is what they experience. And first off, kids are not going to remember. I actually had this conversation with my mom. My stepmom grew up in foster care and stuff. And she values brand name things,
Yeah.
clothing, everything like that. That is something that has struggled and everything like that for years. And we've talked about this recently because, it was one of those things where I'm just like, we could have done so many things
Yeah.
if we weren't having to have, spent all this money on American Eagle and, whatever it was at the day, Justice and things like that, having to be like that, picture perfect, like ideal. And she says that she's like, I definitely struggle with that till this day. And all my kids are grown. Like I still think that in order to be that like image, I do this. And that's where a lot of her financial stuff goes to. And
Yeah.
so it's obvious that there's different people value different things, and that's okay. But I think that was a great point that you should figure out where your money wants to go. Like I love going on adventures, like going to museums, going to zoos, doing things with my kids. That is a lot more important. Yes, I can find cheap places to go. I can go to a park or something, but 9 out of 10 times when we go to the park, we're also going to get lunch out or ice cream or something like that. So we talk about how we budget that to the side.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the biggest thing is that when you look at a value-based budget, when you look at a goals-based budget, because oftentimes we don't recognize like how what we're saying we want and what we're doing is like fighting with each other. It's like we say things like I want to be debt free, and I want freedom and then we spend money on,
I mean, you go to the gas station every day and getting an energy drink or a pack of
yeah,
cigarettes or things
like
like that. Like that,
in
those
the
things add up.
they do. And the reality is if we budget for that, because it's not bad to get you a cup of coffee or get your
Mhm.
energy drink or anything like that. That's not quote unquote bad. What is if you haven't sat down to look at the numbers and you've allotted for this energy drink or coffee drink budget, right? Where you say, okay, I'm going to set aside $75 a month. That is and once that's done, it's done. But all my money literally has a job, it has an assignment, because in the budget it is a portion that is going to debt acceleration to pay off this debt quicker, right? So that I can reach my goal of being debt free, which aligns with my value of freedom, right? So when we think about budgets, it's more than numbers. And I say this all the time because, people look at just the numbers part of it, but it these numbers can do things for your livelihood and for your family and for your desires and all these things if we do it right. And so I think that's the part where a lot of people are like, well, just help me come up with a budget. And it's like, no, like your budget is going to look different from my budget because I value different things. I have different goals. I have different plans, and we have different income and expenses. And so, really, I always say personal finance is personal. It is very personal. It is aligned with who you are as an individual, who your family is as a collective, and what you guys
Yeah.
desire to see
I think
that
it's a good
future looking
transition into
like.
like like building wealth. And I know one of the tools, another tool that we use, and I think we maybe bought it from the same Etsy person, is the Snowball debt tracker. But it helps a lot because you can
That's
see
what helped
inside of that.
me.
And that was another one you can just buy and it helps you calculate.
Well, and
Mhm.
there's so many fun ways to do that. Like, you can do the snowball effect if you want something tangible to see. Like, there's those really cool like binders with like, on this paycheck or on this every week you put something in like $100 to like 100 down, and by the end of it you have $5,000. There's so many fun ways to like make it enjoyable, I guess, to
Yeah.
but there are different
Yeah,
ways
the
to do it, like the
snowball helps a
snowball
lot with my
effect
debt
or
because my debt,
the
at least
binder
on the
effect,
one
which
that
I
we
don't
bought,
know if
it
that
shows the
has like
debt
a
and the interest. So then you really know what it's paying because it shows like, hey, this is how much you owe still, and this is how much you're going to pay on interest if you. Yeah, they're
Well, I'll have
really
to have
cool.
Sabrina share the one she's
Yeah.
using so we can all see the one that she's
Yeah,
I'm
and
like,
the
not to be like overwhelming.
another one that's free that I use that actually helped us pay off those cars in that quick amount of time, along with some other debts, was if you go to financialmentor.com and you type in debt snowball calculator and you put in you will put in like your credit card debt and you start from, smallest to biggest, and then literally within seconds
Tells
calculates
you what year
everything
you'll
and
be done.
then creates a
And
payoff summary for you. And that's a free, yep, that's free. You just type in financialmentor.com and go to debt snowball calculator. And
And
that was the tool that I used that helped us pay off all that debt.
and break it down like that. Break it down like, okay,
highest
we're
interest.
gonna first
Mhm.
focus on credit cards because they have the highest interest rates, or we're gonna let's get the car payments done because those are our highest expenses every single month. Like figure out what works best for your family, best
For
for
sure.
you, and then don't because I would say like if you put everything in, you're gonna be like, oh my god, that's so much. Whether you have a mortgage, credit card, school loans, all the things.
Yeah, and there like the one that I
So
use
yeah,
costs a
definitely
few dollars,
pick
just a digital
narrow it
download.
down
But then
some.
I know I've looked at Navy Federal recently, and I think even if you're on Navy Federal Bank, they have a budget built in on the backside that you can put in your expenses. Hmm.
Yeah, that's pretty new. I saw that too the other day, and I was like, "Oh, that's really like nifty." And I use Navy Federal for like I have an account with them that I kind of put my savings and or things that I'm putting to the side for use of PCS and things like that. Like that goes where trips or anything like that, it goes into that account. Like right now, it's full of money for the house that we're buying, and so. But yeah, I did see that, and I'm sure USAA will be right behind if you have USAA, or there might be a tool on there that I just haven't found yet. But there's so many tools out there.
It's so many, and that's why I always say, do what works for your, because you have
Hmm.
auditory learners, you have visual learners, you have, you know, and
See, I'm
so
a
if
visual
you,
person. I
I'm
think
very
Sabrina's a
visual.
visual person too. So
I
like
am
seeing
very
a
visual.
pretty spreadsheet, seeing something like that where it's like, oh,
It
this is,
is. It's so cool.
it's gonna be so nice to see that like
Yeah, because they have
little
like pie charts
tracker
with
go
like, oh, look at
down.
this is how
Like
much money
Yeah,
went towards
yeah,
one
it helps.
thing, and yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
satisfying to see like a visual of
it
that
is.
going down. When you just
Yeah.
have numbers, it's just numbers. So find the way that works for you.
And I would say celebrate your journey.
simple by
Like, don't celebrate it by getting into debt. Like, I've had people like, oh my
that's
gosh, I paid off
why.
this credit card. I went shopping. Are you kidding me? Like, no, find ways that, and the ultimate goal, it may end up with like, while I was paying off this debt, every time I was, would do something, I would put a slush of money over here because the final, once we became debt free, was for us to go
Cool.
on a
Yeah.
trip or whatever. That's a good celebration, but it's giving you something to look forward to, and it helps it when that journey gets tough, when you want to just splurge and your mind is like, I want to do this, but then you remember those goals and values that you can pull yourself back in. But celebrate yourself on the journey. It may be like, you know what, I've saved these last few weeks, or this month I did a really good job. I'm going to treat myself to a really nice coffee date with a book, and just by myself, like that makes me happy. Again, what are some of the things that make you happy that would not affect your budget? That's one thing to write
And
down,
I
so
think
that
that's just
when you
like when you're
do,
trying to
you
work
can
out.
celebrate yourself in that way.
Yeah, because the
Some people
workout
are
girls
like, I
that
want to
are like, oh,
buy a
I'm
new
gonna set
workout
goals, and then
outfit.
it's like you were
Yeah.
saying, they go out and spend a bunch of money, but or like the workout people are like, oh, I'm gonna go treat myself to ice cream and cake, and it's like, well, that's not the reward you want.
Right. It's like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
you're undoing the work you've done, man. Like but when you just say like, hey, I've been consistent on this workout journey for a while. I actually qualified to buy myself a new workout outfit, or, a new water bottle, whatever. That gives you something to look forward
yeah.
to without
So one other
truly
topic, I know we
undoing
have
all the
so many
work you've
more,
done.
but we can't get everything always in an episode. But retirement.
I think we kind of touch base on a couple things. Like, we touch base on like financial readiness, like having like how we can be ready for different
Really.
things. Like, and that really comes down to budgeting and making sure that, we're putting things aside. And, maybe, it's different for families who've never experienced like PCSing and things like that. And they may not know
Yeah.
what to expect, which is why we have the podcast, why we're talking about it, why we try to get that information out to everyone. But having those conversations, asking
So on
friends
there,
like, hey,
I
like, what
want to
should I
just
do? But
touch it because I know as military families, there's so many corporate jobs where they have these huge
Yes.
401ks that the company's helping pay certain chunks into that and helping you throughout your entire career build something that you'll have some sort of money. But that's not always really what's happening on the military side.
Yes.
So how can on a short budget, like when and how should we start budgeting
I
for
would
that? I think
agree.
like we're in our 30s. I'm like that's gonna come fast.
Yeah, and so I know that after 2018, for those that entered into the service, that the newer retirement system for the
Okay,
TSP plan, it did include matching, which matching pretty much means that it's contributing, the government is actually contributing 1% of your base pay into your TSP.
so
Even
building.
if you, the service member, does not put anything in there, it is still contributing 1%, right? But if you, the service member, contributes up to 5%, then the government matches that. And so essentially, if you put in 5%, the government matches that 5% plus the automatic 1%. So you're really getting, well over
Yeah,
10% going into this account that is pre-tax, right? And so the benefit of that is that this money is sitting in this account, is growing. You want to make sure you know how it's growing, so make sure there's different types of strategies within the TSP. So you don't want it to be sitting in a super conservative. If you got 20 plus years worth of retirement, you want it to be moderately aggressive to really be able to get some return on it. But the goal is that don't leave free money on the table. That's number one, because you don't want to wait till you're age 50 to be like, oh, let me look at how much I have in retirement. You don't really have anything. Right now is the time to really consider that. And that first month or two, when you've upped your contributions, you might feel a little sting. But after that, you're going to be like, okay, we've managed with what we've managed with, and this is really good. And so over time, you'll start to see that fund go
if
up
they're
higher,
offering it,
and
take
you
it.
don't want to just leave free government money on the table. So I would just admonish you, if you haven't, right, if you haven't looked at your TSP and you haven't looked at how much you've been contributing, maybe up your contribution, or at least start your
Right.
contribution
I mean, for
and
health
allow the
insurance and
government to
everything, that
also
comes
put
out of
some
our check
money
and we
into
don't
it
see
based
it.
on that new
It's the
rule.
same thing on the back end. Like you just don't see it, and once it's done, it's gone, and you don't notice it anyways. Yeah,
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you get it back.
It's gone, yeah. And the good thing is it's not gone. Like
Hmm.
health insurance, oftentimes we don't see that. Like, we're not sick or whatever, and sometimes we are sick and we're like, I'm still paying money. But for the most part, you don't see that. What you will see is
Right,
this,
and you can't
because you
touch it. Well,
see
that's the
now
science
a
too. It's like
nest
we all
egg is
have
set up for
savings,
your
but then
future
there's
that
like,
is able to
oh, I'm gonna
benefit you.
just borrow a little bit, just a little bit, but at least your 401k or whatever is just, it's gone, it's there, and you will eventually get it, but you can't touch it in the meantime. And I think that's important. And another thing I want to touch on,
Yeah.
if you're active duty still, make sure your spouse is telling the Army when they get injured, is getting looked at, because VA is how military help themselves retire. And if he didn't document it, you aren't going to get a good rating. And if you want a good rating that helps
Document
you
everything.
so you
Yeah.
can retire early, you need to be thinking about that and actually go into the doctors and get things reported, because otherwise they'll be like, oh, we can't prove that you didn't do that since you got out. And then that's that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like,
Your back
yeah,
started
like if
hurting
you
right
know you
after
got
you
a
did a jump
concussion
or
on the
something,
jump, go get
go get
checked
looked
out.
at.
Like, you know,
Absolutely.
I mean, you see it so often. You see so often where
Mm-hmm.
people don't go get checked and then they try to go get ratings and then they're like denied because there's no proof for it. And
Yeah.
so, you know, if you have it documented, like I'm so glad. I mean, I think we're fortunate because our parents were military too, so they were very like, you need to make sure you do that. Like that was the first thing that
And I
both
think
my dad
it's
and
gotten
my
better. I think the
husband's dad
military
was just
culture of
like,
like,
make
hey,
sure
you're
you
gonna whine and
document
your sergeant's gonna be mad or
every
whatever,
injury.
like, has gotten better. It's not that culture anymore. But when our spouses got in, it was like, you weren't gonna go get checked because your ankle was just feeling wobbly. Like you weren't gonna do that, because then your command would be
Yeah.
like, oh, you think you want to get on a med thing so you don't have to do the PT. Like there was things, and it's changed. So hopefully, as we continue to move towards retirement,
Oh.
others are, that it's not. Mm-hmm.
I mean, and just say that. Just, hey, man, I was injured. I just want to document it. Like in case something down the road. I mean, be honest about it, or have them be honest about it. I mean, I feel like most leadership nowadays are going to be like, oh yeah, like definitely, like, okay, cool. Like you can go during sick call,
Yeah.
but you know, or whatever the case may be. For sure. I do.
Well,
it is a different
so I think we
mentality nowadays.
covered pretty much
too, so
everything that we
I
had
agree
kind
with
of
that.
wanted to cover. And it's just, there are resources. I think that that's always why we do these. And can you tell us maybe a little bit about like what Moneybox Academy personally could do for anybody that's listening if they wanted to try to get some like one-on-one help stuff?
Absolutely. So we are actually launching our one-on-one counseling services. We're doing it in the top of the year. That's the goal. And so if you find yourself and you're like, hey, I've gotten help across the board, but I need some really action-packed, personal, relatable help to navigate this journey, then definitely reach out to us. If you are not following our journey of like bringing financial intelligence to the communities that we serve, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
We do a lot. We put out tips as well as guidance, as well as we put out a lot of the workshops and things we're doing in the community. So if you want to tap in, if it's a webinar and you're in a different territory, but you want to tap in, that would be great for you to be a part of it. But that is something that we are
Awesome.
launching in the top
So
of the
you
year
guys
because we
will have
recognize
access to that in the
the
show notes. I will
significant
have all
need
of Crystal's
for
information in the
one-on-one
show notes. So if
counseling.
you just want to reach out or want to be able, I mean, I would assume Crystal will be happy to come speak for your unit if it's something that you want to like learn more directly on how to teach your soldiers how to do financing, because we are on Race Across America. So there's
Absolutely.
everybody listening, and bring it to them. Like we said, it should be required. Make it required in your unit if you think it's something that would be helpful.
Absolutely.
Less complaints.
Make it required in your
I mean, it
unit.
would just make your life easier if you don't have to deal with like all the financial like issues that I know that our first sergeants and commanders are dealing with. So, like again, like I feel like it would just make everybody's life easier if it's
Yes.
just presented. And I love that there are resources like Crystal's The Money Box that is coming out to help provide those resources and a little bit more ready available for families when they're seeking it. Because I do feel like there's so many families out there who are trying to cut the cost of things. You see so many people who are, you know, becoming homesteaders and making their own things just to, save money and all that kind of stuff. So I do think that there is a one for it out there. And so
Oh,
I
for
cannot
sure.
wait to see the program at the top of the year. I'm excited.
Me too. Thank y'all so much. This has been a great conversation. For anyone that's listening, you got this. You can do this. You're more than able and capable. And if you need support, there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually, strength to
Absolutely.
say I
Well,
need support
thank
and
you
to
for
get
coming
support
on,
on this
and I hope
journey.
that people get
And I
something
just
from this
appreciate
and
you
are
all
able to
tuning
help,
in to this
especially with
conversation because I
Christmas
think it
coming
was
up.
amazing.
Finances need to get settled before then, so I hope that this was a good time for you guys to listen to it, and we will be back with another episode in a couple weeks. Bye.
Absolutely. Awesome. Bye,
Hi,
guys.
guys.